Hey everyone, we are live and welcome to Oaktown Dreamin Presents. My name is Michael Arias and I'll be your host for this morning's event. A little bit about myself. I currently work for a Salesforce customer, helping manage enhancements and customizations for our instance of Salesforce. I also co-lead the Salesforce Oakland user group with Christine Moy Harmon and Cynthia Hill. For those who know my previous co-leader, Tammy Lau, she had to step down now because she now works for Salesforce. So congrats to her on her new role. I think she's out there in the audience. For those new to Oaktown Dreamin, we are a community-led Salesforce conference for the community and by the community. We are not employees of Salesforce. We are Salesforce customers and users and enthusiasts, part of the larger Salesforce community. If you're also wondering what Oaktown means, it's actually a nickname for the city of Oakland as well. We held our inaugural Oaktown Dreamin Conference as a virtual event last fall in 2020. So today's event is special as this is a continuation or part 2 of our Leadership Activated panel since we ran out of time last fall. During that panel, we discussed leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Salesforce ecosystem, the technology industry, and beyond. I know a lot has transpired just over the last 6 to 7 months since our summit, even just this last week. So this topic is still timely, just as it ever was. Now, to get us started, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It looks like we have our panelists starting to join us. So I'm going to give everyone an overview. So we started off with welcome. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping. We'll also talk a little bit about our sponsors, Own Backup and GetFeedback. Then we'll get into our part 2 of our Leadership Activated panel with our moderator, Shonnah, and our guest panelists, Kevin, Matthew, Jesse, Solomon, and Rebe. Then we'll take some questions from the audience and finally wrap up with an Own Backup raffle for a pair of iPods. So actually, let me do this. Let me go ahead and if you want to register for the where is it, raffle, let me go ahead and send them. Where did it go? To the attendees. Here's the link in the chat to register. Okay. In terms of housekeeping, this is a Zoom webinar format, so everyone will be on mute except for our speakers and panelists. The chat is open, so please be respectful. It will be monitored. Also, if you have any questions, we'll open up some questions for the panel from the audience. And we are recording the panel discussion and we'll be posting to YouTube later on. All right. So in terms of our sponsors, we have Own Backup. They were actually one of our founding sponsors from last fall. Own Backup accelerates business growth through automatic and complete Salesforce data protection. With Own Backup data protection, your organization can avoid unexpected detours along your digital transformation journey. They did share a video with us, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. It's a short one. Okay, here we go.
Losing access to Salesforce data can mean losing everything. Orders grind to a halt, the brand is tarnished, and there's all that wasted energy on a fire drill that lasts days or weeks. Fortunately, there's Own Backup, the #1 cloud data protection platform for Salesforce. It's super simple and doesn't compete for implementation resources. Just log in with your Salesforce credentials, click a couple buttons, and never worry about data loss disrupting your business or your life. Receive alerts to spot potential issues and recover quickly with precision repair. With Own Backup, run in the cloud and never fall down.
All right. And also, my organization actually uses Own Backup through a lengthy and a very intense evaluation process. We actually chose them because we thought they were the best solution for our company. All right. And our other sponsor we have is GetFeedback. They're also a founding sponsor. Tap into the voice of your customer. Great customer experiences start with real-time feedback. Send surveys that make it easy for your customers to tell you how they feel about every interaction from sale to service to identify gaps and exceed customer expectations. Thank you to both our sponsors. And now on to the Leadership Activated panel. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. Let's see who we've got here. Okay, we've got Shonnah. Hi, Shonnah.
Hey, how are you?
And we got Solomon, Jesse, Rebe, and Matthew, and Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Morning. Good to see everyone.
Yeah. So what I'll do is Shonnah is a Salesforce MVP with GetFeedback. I'll let her introduce herself and our guest panelists. I'll go ahead and get off the video and take it away, Shonnah.
Thank you so much. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be back with you all and to have this important discussion. My name is Shonnah Hughes. I'm the Global Product Growth and Innovation Evangelist with GetFeedback by SurveyMonkey. And yeah, a lot of other titles that I don't care to ramble through. But I also want to introduce my amazing panel that I have here with me today. I'm going to go ahead and state their names, and if you all can then just give a brief overview of, what you do and where you are at in the world. So I'm going to start with Jesse Martinez, and Jesse is an amazing Salesforce community member. So go ahead, Jesse, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Shonnah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us on a Friday morning. My name is Jesse Martinez, and I wear a few different hats, and so I'll go quickly. First, I'm a VP of Business Development at Ennube Solutions, providing Salesforce solutions and custom development, and also a Copado partner. In addition, I'm also the founder of Latinx Startup Alliance, helping to empower Latino founders. And lastly, I'm also the founder for Salesforce Latinx Founders, so building a community of founders to help support them in the ecosystem. So thank you.
Awesome. And where are you at, Jesse?
San Francisco.
Thank you. And next on my screen, I have Kevin Nichols, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Kevin Nichols, founder, president, and CEO of the Social Engineering Project, which is a STEM-based nonprofit organization with Stanford University designed to address the lack of diversity in the tech industry. And then I'm also the Senior Diversity Integration Partner at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, which I just joined in February.
Congratulations. And where are you located?
I'm in Bay Point right now.
Okay. Thank you. Next on my screen, I have the incomparable Rebe De La Paz.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Name's Rebe De La Paz out of Chicago. I do the South, so that's where I'm from, right? South of Chicago. I am a Salesforce MVP, diversity and inclusion champion, right? So I'm always talking about what can I do for my community and, for people who come from backgrounds that are, disadvantaged like I originally come from. And CEO and founder of my own boutique consulting firm that, is trying to do what I've coined as a return on impact versus a return on investment, right? So, just trying to reframe and redefine what business should look like and in terms of how it relates to community and supporting people, right? So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you, Shonnah.
Yep, thank you, Rebe. Next on my screen is Solomon. Solomon, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon to anybody on the East Coast. Solomon Wilkins, head of inclusion and diversity for Synopsys, which is a tech company in Silicon Valley. We are an American electronic design automation company. We focus on intellectual property, software security, silicon design and verification, et cetera. I've been in this role for about 5 months. I'm excited to be here, being with all of you. My role specifically is to design and develop our inclusion and diversity strategy across the company. We've got about 15,000 employees globally, and I head our I&D function. And Kevin, you just talked about the program you have at Stanford. Better, we need to talk offline because my office is in Mountain View and I need some diverse talent. And it sounds like you got access to it. So let's connect.
Definitely. And I know a lot of folks over there at Synopsys, so we definitely need to talk.
Absolutely.
Love it. Making connections already. And last but not least, Matthew.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me again, not only on the panel, looking forward to speaking and having good conversation. Currently in Seattle, Washington, founder and owner of Honest Human Resources Consulting, where we really help everyone get to where they want to be in their careers. Also the creator of the provocative podcast, Young Black HR, where we take a spin on how we define HR and really get people to understand that HR just isn't for HR folks, but we are all human resources, and we center around our topics and tell our stories around that. During my day-to-day, my 9 to 5, I'm a director in HR BP at a tech startup, basically making life easier for those who are in the sports industry to buy and sell their trading cards and pay with Bitcoin and all that good stuff. So really in that pretty unique space. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you all again for being here. We've got some major hitters on this panel, some amazing minds, and I like to say some amazing melanated minds. So I'm excited to have this conversation today. I want to start out with you, Matthew, because one of the things that I have take issue with is the HR role, because traditionally the HR role is, or has been seen, they're there to protect the organization, not the people. So when you bring, problems and issues, their main goal is to protect the organization. How do you, really, combat that and really focus on the people, because the people is what make the organization, but a lot of people don't feel like HR, and especially people of color, don't feel like HR protects them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I tell people, for those who are outside of the HR realm, our world, one of our chief jobs and really important task is to ultimately manage risk, right? Does risk become managed with protecting the business? Does it become managed with protecting people? I think and you'll hear me say this from time to time, but the typical HR answer is it depends, right? One of the things that people have to understand and need to know is that what HR isn't is we aren't solely serving the will and the need for the business by itself. When you think about professionals like myself, especially for those who are in HR but are underrepresented, people don't realize how many times we push back. There have been terminations and things I have blocked. There have been investigations I have stopped, because you have to understand, while yes, we're stereotyped to protect the business, sometimes a lot of the things that we do and we look into and we are, overall in the charge of, aren't in the best interest for the employees. It's one of the things where, yes, we want to protect the business from, being sued or anything like that, but also we want to protect the employees with their not only psychological safety, with their employee experience, et cetera. So just managing, it's a constant, I would say, a balance between the two. In each situation, it calls for its own separate sort of conclusions and circumstances that we take into account.
Right. And I'll go ahead and ask Solomon, because Solomon, you're a chief of D&I.
Speak on it.
What is your role? Do you sit under HR? Do you sit alongside HR? How does that work within your organization?
I do sit under HR, but I would call it a dotted line, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you think about inclusion and diversity, it's more than just, it's a critical business imperative. And a lot of times people that don't understand the role of I&D professionals, they think we're here to just make people feel good, or, it feels good, but it's tough to measure. There's realistic ways to measure inclusion and diversity. It's working or not. But I'll circle back. I'll piggyback off what Matthew said. The people run the business. I had a conversation with some leaders across the company the other day, and I asked a simple question. If every employee at the company decided to walk out, what would the company look like? They were like, it wouldn't be a company. So that's really that's how I look at business. As amazing as the processes are and the design automation and the technology, if every living, breathing person walked out the door, there wouldn't be no company. So when you think about the word human resource, we're actually supposed to be a resource for humans. right? So I'm always about putting the people first 100% of the time before anything, because without the people, the process will fail.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to another question that I have for this panel, and I'm going to direct this one at Jesse. Jesse, when it comes to, psychological safety, and I'm thinking about, in the Black and Brown communities, you work with a number of organizations, that really help individuals find their way in the tech industry. How do you incorporate, protecting them from the traumas, that we experience and that continues to be inflicted upon us all?
Yeah, thank you, Shonnah. That's a great question. And, it evolves from year to year, right? Taking the learnings that you have from the experiences that you encounter. But I would say in working with entrepreneurs and youth, it's always the ability to listen, right? Mm-hmm. To be that person that can listen to the good and to the bad, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to provide empathy as well. And so trying to understand the situation and trying to be objective with respect to your perspective and any opinions that you may share. And so I think a lot of times people just want someone to hear them out and hear their story, right, and what they may be encountering. And so I think just being able to be a great listener, right, to be there for someone, and to also be able to check in. So what is that follow up? What is that follow through? And so I think that's what I've been doing for many years and working with the people that I do.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just, I want to bring that back around, Jesse, to what you said, because this is something that's been weighing heavy, on my heart, Jesse, Kevin, and Rebe. I know all three of you personally work with, young adults, the younger generation. And what we've been seeing with especially our Black and Brown younger generation, how, they've been, I would literally say targeted in a lot of circumstances, how, the effects of COVID and generational poverty and trauma has affected them and how they're moving in the world today. What has been some of the things, maybe that you're doing or that your organizations are doing to try and help, this demographic? And I'll start with you, Kevin.
Well, a lot of it is addressing the digital divide. There are, as you know, in COVID, with having little access to Wi-Fi and high-speed broadband, it disproportionately affects, Black and Brown students. And so you have, and you've probably seen pictures on Facebook and things of that, where kids have been sitting in front of like Starbucks and other places trying to do their homework or being able to log on. So last year, particularly, we, through a partnership with First Republic Bank, were able to garner about 50 laptop computers and provide free laptops for kids that participated in our Science in the City program that we did. We also have had a partnership with Comcast to be able to provide low income, I think it was $13 a month or something like that, high-speed broadband for families who didn't have high-speed internet, so that they could get online and participate and do distance learning. It's really about using partnerships and also leveraging corporations to be able to use their resources to make a difference and make it happen. So everyone's putting their Black Lives Matter statements and we're rushing around to do that. But we actually needed these companies to invest money in bridging that divide. So we've seen some success in that.
Awesome. And Rebe?
So I kind of want to bring back to the point where you talked with Jesse about the psychological and the mental ramifications. So the thing about it is, when we look at Black and Brown communities, there's this wall, almost like a scar, that's been built, from consistent psychological and mental abuse, right? And that's because you have no awareness, number one, right? It's like the dark cloud is covering you. you don't even realize that there's a wall. So that's why, you know, so many organizations always approach with, let's let the young people be aware of the opportunities that, you know, this light exists in the world. And then once you see that there's a wall, right? The wall is so big and so vast, that scar is so deep. The pain is deep because you didn't even realize that you needed this type of therapy. You had no awareness, right? And now you're aware. Where's the door? Because just because you become aware doesn't mean you have access, because there's a wall. How do you break through the wall? So when we talk about the digital divide and you visualize it, the digital divide is literally a wall of a lack of awareness, right? Because that ties into the collaboration. So you have awareness, you have access, and then you have collaboration. We always talk about a seat at the table. While people sitting at the table talking, there's people out there doing. But because they're not collaborating, things not getting done. And it's these silos, right? We always talking about, oh, we're all, you know, so many steps away from each other. Yeah, but there's walls in between us. And a lot of those walls are our own egos, pride, self-awareness. And then there's that trauma, right? Because the trauma is built into a caste system in America, particularly, that we all just like look at the pink elephant in the room and walk around it, right? Like, there's a difference between transparency and there's a difference between talking about it, right? I'm tired of talking, I'm just doing. And I found that when I do, things get done. And
Exactly.
that's how I see it.
It's
Good to add to that. And we touched on it, right? We talk about this trauma. And so just going back to mental health. And so growing up, you know, for us, it was us, right? As Latinos, it was taboo, right? To talk about mental health.
Yep.
And so, you know, what the pandemic has brought, unfortunately it came, but what it brought was the ability to talk about it, right? And to be aware of the resources and to have these open conversations about mental health. So we've come a long way. And, you know, especially when we're talking about our youth is, you know, being able to have those conversations with our youth and point them to those resources. And so I think that's one of the big things that I have seen, you know, over my lifetime and then during this pandemic crisis that we experienced.
Yeah, the thing that, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, I was just going to add in one thing real quick. You know, when we think about, you know, everything that has happened with COVID over this last year, you know, one of my core values and one of the things that I help my leaders get is really having courageous conversations, but in the context of empathetic leadership. When we think about what's going on, when we talk about the digital divide, when we talk about the mental health, when we talk about things that we see that's going on the news, sometimes, you know, we've been taught collectively as professionals to be more robotic in our approach, whether you're in HR or not, right? To always, you know, oh, it's not business, it's not personal, it's business, right? You know, sometimes those very, I would say, things are psychologically damaging in nature. So when we think about, and I'm always preaching to my HR folks about this, when we think about humanizing, right? What does that look like, right? Humanize HR, right? Humanize engineering, right? Humanize marketing, right? Treat people like humans versus the roles that they're in, because you never know what's going on in someone's background, you know, especially with all the traumas that, you know, us as Black folks and other minorities that are going through. We got a lot going on. And especially when we think about, you know, how COVID has changed and shaped things. I mean, shoot, even when we talk about the digital divide, you know, you don't think about how well your internet service is until you need it every single day for 10 to 12 hours. I caught myself at a few libraries and a couple of Starbucks, you know, just during my time, you know, using some hot spots and Wi-Fi's and all that stuff. So as we continue to have this conversation, I'm always a huge fan of just humanizing, period, and really getting people to understand what that empathetic leadership looks like and how to go about having it as we get through this together.
Right. The thing that bothers me with organizations is they'll say, bring your whole self to work, bring your authentic self to work, right? They don't really want that, right? I mean, when you really think about it, they do not want that. And let's be honest, because if I'm bringing my authentic self to work, I'm bringing all of the generational trauma that I have with me into my co-working space. And I'm needing my employer to have some type of empathy for that, right? I am needing them to really be able to, like you said, empathize with me. And that's where, when they talk about equality versus equity, like I need something different and I need something more possibly than my coworker. It makes them uncomfortable to have these conversations. We know that. We know that it's uncomfortable, but when we think about it, yes, it's uncomfortable, but for us, it is painful. It is life-threatening. It is debilitating.
That's when we need leaders in positions like I'm in to really educate the business about why this work is so important. I think a lot of times, one of the things, I grew up in Oakland, right? And so Oaktown Dreamin is passionate. I'm so Oakland, I got a welcome to Oakland tattoo on my forearm, right? That's how much I love from Oakland. But I think, one of the things I've learned to.
Oh, Solomon's freezing. We need him to get to a hot spot.
Well, we need to get him that Comcast.
Yes,
right. I just to finish his thought for him real quick. I most of what I did growing up was in Oakland. I actually claim to put El Cerrito on the map. Not too many people are from El Cerrito, born and raised in El Cerrito, but grew up in Berkeley and did my businesses purposely in Oakland for that reason, because I want to be a part of that community. But piggybacking, it does take people who are making the business case to make sure that people understand what diversity, equity, inclusion really is all about. And I'm excited because I work at an organization now where I've always felt that STEM education was very important. I spent a lot of my career, junior high and high school, studying extra math, science, chemistry, physics, and engineering courses. And to be at an organization where, and be a part of the new Biden administration, where their directives with the Department of Energy are to look at, social and climate racism, and looking at how, people live in communities where they are breathing more toxins and all of the chemicals that are in the grounds near plants, where Black and brown people have to live because it's cheaper and it's more affordable, et cetera. So looking at environmental justice and social justice issues from that lens is something that is very important to me, and I intend to make a bigger stink of it and a better cause to fight.
Yeah. I think it's really important that we have warriors on every side of the coin, right? We know that our country was built on this systemic racism. Like we know that, and if we know that, how do we dismantle it? How do we fix it? The one thing that troubles me is that the country itself, our government, isn't willing to take the necessary steps. So they are requiring its citizens and the organizations that run the country to do it for them, which is horrible, to say the least. Solomon, we got you back. Did you get on the Comcast?
This happens every once in a blue moon. It's never happened on a platform like this, but I mean, it's technology, so
exactly
it is what it is, right? But what I was saying was, I think sometimes we, as Black and brown people, have an expectation for white and Asian people or other people to have empathy for us, to understand our situation. I think we have to, in addition to that, understand their perspective, right? And let me explain.
Mm-hmm.
As a inclusion and diversity leader for a global company, part of what I consistently articulate to the business is that they have to do a better job of connecting with their employees, having empathy for their employees, et cetera. We have this expectation, but a lot of times if there's like let's say a VP a senior vice president from Europe who may say something like, I don't care who we hire, black, brown, purple, yellow. I just want the best candidate, right? And we know there's no purple people. So I like to call people on those statements. But in addition to that, we have to understand that if somebody grew up in Los Gatos, if they went to an all-white high school, they grew up in an all-white town, they went to a predominantly white institution, they don't have the experience of working with and connecting with black people, with brown people. It's just not their experience. And so we come into a space expecting them to automatically have empathy for us, and they just don't know how, right? And so instead of being mad and frustrated, for me, I look at these as opportunities to teach, as opportunities to educate and inform, and ultimately inspire. So instead of me being pissed because a white man doesn't understand how to communicate with me, or because they aren't shouting Black Lives Matter, or because they aren't advocating because police brutality, I take it as an opportunity to teach them, to educate them, so they can understand why this is important. Because if I go in pissed off and I'm mad like this, and then they are not going to be receptive to it, we're going to just butt heads. So what I've learned is to meet them where they are. Everybody on this diversity journey is at different stages. Some people are here, and some people are like, here. Some people are further along. But if you make people feel bad because they just don't know, they're not going to talk about it. Like I had a woman ask me, should I call you a person of color or a colored person? Right. And anybody that's Black would know, don't even think about calling me a colored person, right? Because that is pre-Jim Crow, that's slavery. But she didn't know, right? And if I would have made her feel bad, she probably wouldn't have asked that question again. I actually told her, I don't want to be called a person of color or a colored person. Call me Black. I don't even want to be called African American, right? Call me Black. But just because that's how I prefer to be, what I prefer to be called, another Black person may prefer to be called something different. So we're not a monolith. Everybody's not the same. And so I think my whole point in this statement is we have to be comfortable with people not understanding our experience. Like difference matters. We're different. And as a cat that grew up in Oakland, K through 12, Oakland Public School District, I graduated from Oakland Tech, and I went to Humboldt State for undergraduate school. It was 1.6% Black, 96% white. I went to St. Mary's and got my master's, predominantly white. I've been able to integrate in both spaces. I can go to Oakland and hang out in the hood, and I can be in a corporate boardroom and add value there, right? Most people don't know how to navigate both spaces. The thing I've learned is that we're different. Like, we're different, and we can't expect, so just like a senior leader, let's say a white man, just like a white man in a senior role, like it sometimes can be ethnocentric. Ethnocentrism is essentially saying, I think and act one way, and I expect you to think and act one way. We have to embrace the fact that we're different. And instead of expecting people to act like me, I have to be comfortable and willing to learn about their background, how they were socialized, what schools they went to. Are they watching Fox News or are they watching CNN? Right?
That's what I was going to bring out.
It's so much. Yeah. It's so much. So that's my point. Like, we got to be
our perspective.
Absolutely. We got to be comfortable understanding that we're different, and how can we come together even though we're different?
Exactly. And okay, thank you, Solomon. I appreciate that. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the corporate space, et cetera. I want to talk a little bit about what's been happening in the world today and how that's affecting all of us. As you all know, I am based in Minnesota. I'm actually born and raised here, and we all know what's been happening here and what a horrible place it is. However, with the Derek Chauvin, trial coming to an end, how has it affected, you all in just your daily lives, or even in your organizations? Like, how has your organizations been handling, these type of traumas that inflict the community?
I want to start off by jumping in, and when we think about situations like you just brought up, Shonnah, it kind of reminds me of what Solomon was really just getting at, meeting people where they're at, right? We go from things being homogenous in a lot of different ways to now the expectation seemingly, I'll put that in air quotes, is every time something happens, got to put a statement out about it, right? You know, I kind of group statements, Black Lives Matter signs, things like that, as more or less on the performative and pandering side of things. So for me, I don't want, and I'm just speaking for me as an individual, I don't want an organization to just pander us. I just want you to do. When I think about going back to when I was talking about earlier, empathetic leadership, when we see the Chauvin related cases and other things that are happening around, you know, our country and the world, you know, I want, sometimes empathetic leadership can be in the form of, hey, you know what? If you all need a mental health day, I understand some things are going on in the news, feel free to take it. Sometimes when we think about DE&I and other forms out there, you know, we make them too complicated in a sense, right? You know, for me, I'm very big on being practical, and even just meeting where people are at in that sense, saying, hey, I'm not going to act like I can, you know, relate to it, right? Let's just say if I'm not a person of color, but I know enough to say, hey, you know what, things are going on. You know, if you need a day off or something like that, feel free to take it. And even just thinking about how I work with my business partners and my leaders to really understand and help them understand these things. It's not a thing where we can only look at it as, oh, a day off means a lack of productivity, right? We have to go a little bit beyond and a little bit further than that to really, going back to what I was preaching earlier, you know, humanizing some of these things that are going on in the world.
Exactly. Anyone else want to comment on that? Rebe, don't make me call you out again.
I was hitting unmute.
This is the second panel I gotta do this to you.
Nah, I was hitting unmute and I had to reflect upon it, like seriously, because, you know, I went in, I started my own. So, you know, this conversation is a daily for us. And me living outside of Chicago where like 7-year-olds is getting shot at McDonald's in a drive-through, right? Or on Lakeshore Drive. And I struggle with it myself because I have children. I can't watch the news because it bothers me, right? And it's traumatizing because they're triggering moments for a lot of us because we've had situations or we have family members, and every time you see it, it triggers, right? That's that psychological ramification we were talking about earlier. But I was just thinking in my head, every great civilization in history, no matter what country you think about or continent, Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, they would always convene and have like a gathering where you brought forth your grievances and you had a discussion, right? The discussion is not always positive, right? A lot of times they fought tooth and nail, they hated each other. This country was built on gentlemen who got together, and I use gentlemen loosely, and a lot of them hated each other's guts, right? And yet they started this country on some ideas that they could agree upon, a compromise, right? For lack of a better term. And, you know, what Solomon was saying, you know, as far as you got to come together, the very essence of communication is, you know, finding that common thread, right? I always go out and seek to break rules on purpose. I've always pushed the boundaries, right? Rules are for suckers. Like I learned the rules, but then I learned how to push them because that's how you innovate and you renovate ideas. That's how you make things happen and you evolve, right? And so the one bright hope I have is that being in this pandemic and being in the political, you know, divide that we've had has brought things forward that people would not have been, you know, aware of if we were still moving along the same, right? Change is not always pretty, right? And so the things that are happening in Minneapolis stem from a long history of things that were just steady going and nobody was doing anything, right? Like, I'm sorry, but air freshener in the car, you're gonna pull me over? That's nonsense, right? But you got to keep pushing, right? And a lot of times, you know, especially for Black and Brown communities, it's with our lives. So all this stuff that's going on right now, this ain't new. This been going on since we got brought here, and this been going on in other countries as well, because, you know, as much as we live in our bubble of America, what happened with George Floyd was a triggering moment around the world. You got Paris, you got France. They're like, hey, look, these laws you putting on the book are bogus. We got to stop that. The UK, it's microaggressions. That's a big term now in the past 10 years, because I don't think people was really saying microaggressions unless they was in like a D&I situation from the 80s where they first started bringing it up, right? But it's awareness. It always comes back to awareness. You don't know something's happening if you're not aware. If I live in a bubble, I don't know. But if I come to you as a woman, as a Black woman, and I tell you, hey, look, I got followed in Target the day after they was looting downtown Chicago. And I was just trying to buy a piñata for my baby's birthday. I didn't realize I was gonna get followed in Target, right? And but me telling that story and being a storyteller and telling my narrative and owning it, that makes a deeper and a different impact and a focal point for those people who are not aware. They like, wow, I live in Wisconsin or Montana. That never happened to me. Well, you know me, you know what my reputation is. We're friends. How do you feel about someone following me in Target? You right? That's that awareness. That's that little chip in that their bubble to let them know things happening out here. And that's what I feel like as inflammatory as things are happening in Minnesota, Chicago, Detroit, New York, LA, you know, all of the things that are happening is not new. It's just that we have technology that helps to make other people in the common day citizen a storyteller and tell that narrative that others can't see, hear, or even if they heard you, you got the video proof.
Yeah,
right.
and I just want to piggyback one thing though about all that makes me, I will say, I mean, I say it loosely, but excited in the sense that we have so much going on. When you mention politically, like the George Floyd verdict was, as we all took a deep sigh of relief, that's one step closer. However, you know, seeing what the voting laws are, they're rolling back and what's going on in Georgia and Texas and things of that nature, and seeing our people on the ground there fight, organize, turn Georgia blue, you know, it's an exciting time to live in right now in that sense. And the tide is turning. We have to make sure that as our generation takes its turn of progress, that we take more steps forward than we take backwards. Every time we take steps, they're trying to roll things back. We're still fighting for the Civil Rights Act, which was passed in the 65. So it's like, we still take these steps backwards, but we have to make sure we're still going forward. And the last point I want to make, and it's something that I encourage everyone to read, Barack Obama's most recent book. He talked about, you know, people kind of criticize him for not being able to do more or use more executive action and all that stuff. And his response is that, look, you know, you guys really don't see in totality what I was up against, you know? And at the end of the day, for my generation, I did my part to move the needle. You know, it's your job to take it the next leg. And as we're in this relay race, you know, it is every one of our little squares right here on the screen. It's our job right now. The baton is in our hands. What are we going to do with it in order to move the needle further and make sure that even if there's a step or two that goes backwards, that it's still moving forward in progress?
Exactly. One of the things that, you know, I just want to say before we hand it over to the audience to get some live Q&A is that, you know, the thing that troubles me is that, like you said, the rollbacks and the voter registration, like all these things that they're trying to do with the laws and things like that to shut us out, to keep us out, to keep us oppressed. For me, the most egregious is the killings of our young people. You know, they are killing us in the streets like animals. They are killing us without a second thought. They are killing us and deeming it accidental. They are killing us and saying that it was our fault. Because make no mistake, George Floyd was on trial, not Derek. George was. When you listen to the proceedings, when you listen to everything, he was on trial. He was on trial trying to defend his own murder. Okay, so that's the thing where we need, to whoever's listening on this call, we need everyone to do their part, whatever it is, whatever you're good at, whatever whatever your passion is. We need you to do your part, because without everyone doing something, we will take 10 steps back. I just literally found out this morning that a young 17-year-old boy was killed. Anthony Thompson was shot by the police in school, and no charges will be brought because the officer feared for his life. There were 4 officers against one 17-year-old boy. So we need action, we need change, and we need individuals to really step up and help us. So with that, I am going to open it up for Q&A. There is a Q&A feature within Zoom, and I know, I'm not sure how the audio is working, if you can answer live or not. But there is one open question. After the Chauvin verdict, there has been 3 more shootings in Ohio, North Carolina, etc. daily. So it seems to me the arrogance of police have emboldened as the arrogance of killing of George. Sorry, it's a little bit, okay. So their arrogance have, emboldened them. What are you doing in your communities on the grassroots levels in your HR corporations? So anyone that want to take that?
I'll give it a stab just from the HR perspective. So in addition to, I was mentioning it earlier when we talked about the idea of mental health days. When we think about the grassroots, obviously this is going to look a little different based on the communities that we're in, right? What's going on up here in Seattle, more than likely is going to be different than Oakland, et cetera. So one of the things that we try to do at my organization, if anyone does want to, do any sense of political, activism or anything like that, we provide space in the place for employees to do that through community events, community service, things of that nature. So as things are happening, right, because we know this isn't going to stop overnight, but as things are happening and people feel empowered and motivated and honestly just want to take that time away, we provide that space to where an employee knows, hey, you know what, I might be the only Black person here. My white coworkers may not get it, but at least my organization gets it enough to where they understand that I need to step aside and, take a day or 2 or whatever off, or I need to go participate and do this, or I need to, do anything that I can for my individual community. So those are just a few practical things that we do. And I think that was a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Anyone else want to comment?
I would just say that, and this isn't from my experience currently at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, but as a consultant, I've consulted with a number of different companies over the past 5 or 6 years in the tech space. What I would say is that having places, a lot of people are calling them brave spaces or things of that nature, where you're having, I won't say facilitated conversations, but conversations where groups of people can come together and have the discussion that we're having right now in a room. Because rather than people being in silos and not really discussing what's going on current events wise, and not having anyone from other communities to, you don't want to be the representative of the whole entire race, in these conversations, but nevertheless having a dialogue about these things, because as Solomon mentioned earlier, we're not a monolith. I mean, we have different opinions and perspectives of things. And the facts of these things are different as well. And as we learn more about these incidences, that makes a difference. So I always try to have conversations when it comes to current events, talking about what we know versus what we don't know, and then not rushing to judgment. Not every person that is in a officer involved shooting is, killed without cause, so, we're not anti-police all the time. There are incidences where, that these homicides or whatever are justified. However, we know statistics, we know racism, we know that there's a disproportionate number. If there's 27 people in Columbus who've been murdered by the police and 23 of them happen to be Black, that's not coincidence, So we need to dig deeper, go further, organize, et cetera. But once you have those discussions and have facts, it's easier to have those conversations rather than just discussing things from a gut or what you feel or how you were raised to think about these situations. So.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any comments on that?
For me, my focus is pretty much access and awareness, right? So working with organizations and trying to bring programs together and build programs that brings awareness to, young folks in the schools who are disproportionately more focused on sports or music. I'm gonna be a rapper, I'm gonna be a basketball player, football player, that's gonna get me out. And it's like, you could be building apps on your phone right now and that will get you out, right? So that's that awareness feature. And I feel like, a lot of corporations say, yeah, I give to schools. Okay, what school you giving to? Because I see a school that still don't have a playground, right? Or they don't have mulch, so they can't play on their swing sets. So, there's still a large amount of work that needs to be done in terms of helping corporations become aware of how they can use the resources they have to greatly improve those communities where, even if their employees don't live in those communities because they make so much money, it doesn't mean you can't go out to that community that you don't live in and provide, a validation that people have access and can be a part of that organization, like be a role model. Like if we think about traditional role models, who are the role models right now? Jay-Z, Beyonce, LeBron James. Okay, well, where's my technical role models? Where's my doctors at? We had Barack Obama, but, and a lot of some of the politicians out there, but then who are the role models in the community, man? Like we missing that. And my thing is people go to work 9 to 5, go home, watch they Love and Hip Hop or Housewives of Basketball, whatever. And they could be out there and spend 1 hour and be a role model to someone who need that, to know that they can do that and live
Exactly.
it, right?
Exactly.
And I say that because in Chicago, carjackings are insane. You know who doing the carjackings? Young people. It breaks my heart when I hear a 14-year-old carjack somebody. And then you even got the Uber driver scared. Nobody want to drive Uber because they jacking the Uber drivers because nobody else wants to drive in the city, right? But it's the young people. So what's the problem? Mm-hmm. Everybody keep tiptoeing around. We're going to put more police out there. We're going to focus on the carjackers. No, I need you to go in the community. Do what Michael Tubbs did in Stockton and had his police chief go to the church and account for that history that, we got a problem. We need to work on it. And look at how the crime decreased in Stockton, even though he was going through a bankruptcy. Why are people looking at Stockton, California as a model for how they, reevaluate the behaviors of the police? And this is my last thing. This is the elephant in the room with all these police shooting cases, especially the one that just happened with Dwayne Wright. They train to kill people.
Right.
So all this training to shoot.
Right.
You shooting to kill. Let's think about that. We train you to be military specialists to kill people. These are the citizens you proclaim to protect and serve. And that bothers me because that's the essence of it, right?
Yep.
That's a behavioral change. That's a psychological and a mental change. It's a lot of work, but awareness. Let's call it out. Let's call the spade, and let's play it.
Right.
That's how I see it.
Let me say too, the thing that, two things that you brought out for me is very powerful. Back in the day, I remember, early 90s, late 80s, where they had community programs, right? They had all of this investment in the community. We no longer have that anymore. I don't see community centers. I don't see investment in the communities like we used to have, where it kept the kids, off the streets. It kept the kids busy and productive. Like we don't have those things anymore. So what do they turn to? They turn to doing stupid, silly stuff, like that is fun for them or that looks cool. Yes, Solomon?
I would have to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
There may not be as many, but there's the Boys and Girls Club that I grew up in that saved my life. I won't go into all the different organizations, but I think there's a responsibility that the parents have to ensure that their kids get in these programs. And too many times I hear, and this is no offense to you, Shonnah, but too many times I hear people say that there aren't programs, there aren't resources, etc. But my kids are in boxing, my son's in football, my daughter's in dance, my oldest son is 17, he works. He just got accepted in the Cal, so he'll be starting at Berkeley in the fall. Like there's programs for kids if parents want to look. The challenge is parents, Rebe talked about it earlier, the challenge is parents get off work and they're tired. And so they go home and they sit on the couch or go in their room and they watch their shows. And when COVID happened, a lot of parents didn't know how to communicate with their kids. They didn't know how to be with their kids every day because they're used to the school dropping them off at 8 and they get into the after school program, so they pick them up at 6. But now they have to be with their kids all day. So yes, I agree that there aren't as many programs as there were when we were younger, but parents have to go above and beyond. Trust me, I'm leading this an entire company's I&D strategy. I'm also, and I won't get into the details, but I make sure that my kids have access to programs. But the one thing I will say is that some of these programs are expensive, right?
And say that you have that privilege.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and say we need sponsors too.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you have a certain level of privilege. So let's be clear. I have a certain level of privilege. Like my son is in multiple sports and all these things. You know what I'm saying? Like I have a level of privilege, but I know when I go to Northside Minneapolis, where I grew up, there is nothing for the kids there. They don't have the same access, the same hope, the same level of whatever privilege my son has. So that's what I'm speaking to.
I agree.
Like you said, you're managing for one organization. When I think about the single moms that I know, they're working 2 and 3 jobs and have 2 and 3 kids. Like it's not only the parents, because a lot of the parents, they do work and they are tired. Like we can't expect a single mother to be, everything. So at what point
is it the parents' responsibility? Because my mother was a single mother, and my mother made sure I was in the Boys and Girls Club, and we didn't have a car, and we had to catch the bus. And my mother didn't have a college education; she didn't even graduate high school. But now her son has a master's degree, and she raised me as a single mom. So at what point, I agree that we need more programs, but at what?
It's the equity conversation.
Absolutely.
You can't say one person's circumstances is the same as someone else's. So that's where the community, as we've been saying, the community needs to step in. Like an intelligent, amazing Black man such as yourself can step in. If you see someone in your community or even outside of your community, you can say, let me take this young man or this young woman under my wing and help them excel because their parents are struggling. I'm sorry, we only got 1 minute left. We always do this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge is just the lack of resources that we need, for our communities. And so how do we provide that, right? And provide the access.
Awareness. A lot of parents don't realize it's a transition. It's transition to the digital. These programs are not digitally available, but if it's not on an app, that's not shared on Facebook, how am I know? So it's like encouraging these organizations with their go-to-market, but that's where that's collaboration level come in between corporate, community, and then even us as individuals that work at these organizations. Right. Did you go speak up to HR and ask them about this stuff? Did you talk to somebody up? Did you say anything?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's it.
So Solomon, yeah. I agree with you. A lot of it, yes, the parents are responsible, but so is the community.
Absolutely. The community raised me. So don't get it twisted and misinterpret what I'm saying. You know, I think the challenge is when now that I've elevated to this level professionally, I never want my words to be mistaken like, oh, he makes money now, or I grew up in Oakland catching the bus, walking through West Oakland, walking through East Oakland. So I get it. But I also understand that if we sit around and wait for the community, or if we sit around and wait for resources to come in that haven't been here since we've been little, our kids are going to suffer. So at some point, parents and communities have to be accountable for these kids. It can't just be the government. We can't keep blaming them.
Exactly. I agree 100%. I also agree that, I also have to state that, again, I always go back to equity because like I said, I grew up in the Jets. I grew up poor. Yeah. I was a 14-year-old with a kid. So I understand the path. I understand the troubles that we all face. However, I've also seen where my situation was bleak and different. I also seen where it broke some of my friends. It didn't break me, absolutely. But it broke them. So the psychology on what a lot of us can bear and endure is different for each and every one of us. And that's where that support system does come in. And we need to stop looking at each other and saying, you're lazy, you don't want to do this, or you don't want to do that, or, you know what I'm saying? And really seek ways to really try and help and upbuild and uplift each other. So then that our community can heal. I apologize that we went over time, everyone. I love these discussions. Thank you so much, Jesse, Solomon, Kevin, Rebe, Matthew. You have all been great as usual. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again at some point in the future.
Right.
Always a pleasure.
We need a town hall.
Got to.
Thank you, everyone. So, we're still in the process of planning out our next Oaktown Dreamin conference for this fall. But until then, thanks again. I know some of you may have a hard stop at 10 a.m. and I know we got a few minutes over. But just also want to, thank all our panelists and thank our sponsors, and thank you, the audience, for sticking in there. Being a part of this conversation. That having the space to be able to discuss these issues, to have these this opportunity to hear different perspectives from within the community. Again, thank you. And and before I forget, so we're gonna I'm gonna post the go ahead and sign up for the raffle from Oaktown Dreamin. They're from Own Backup. They're giving away some AirPods, but so that should be in the chat. But thank you, everyone, and then we'll see about possibly having another conversation maybe during the fall at Oaktown Dreamin 2021. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Take care.